Madam Foreperson, I understand the jury has reached a verdict. Is that correct? Would you please hand it to Mr. Terrell? The court will look it over first. Then I'm going to hand it back to you, Madam Foreperson, to read it out loud, called Publishing, in open court. Thank you. All right, Madam Foreperson, if you would read the verdict from top to bottom. You may remain seated. If it's easier for you to stand, you certainly can. If you'll pull that microphone in front of you down to you, read it from top to bottom. It is called, again, Publishing the Verdict. Thank you. You may proceed.
Okay. The jury finds the defendant on the following counts. Count 1, malice murder, guilty. Count 2, felony murder, guilty. Count 3, felony murder, guilty. Count 4, felony murder, guilty. Count 5, felony murder, guilty. Count 6, burglary, guilty. Count 7, aggravated sodomy, guilty. Count 8, rape, guilty. Count 9, aggravated assault, guilty. Count 10, aggravated sodomy, guilty. Count 11, arson in the first degree, guilty. Count 12, possession of a knife during commission of a felony, guilty.
All right, Madam Foreperson, if you would present that verdict.
Friends, what you just heard was not a rumor. What you just heard was not a theory, not a live stream, not a thumbnail, and certainly not a social media spin job. What you just heard was a jury verdict. A jury of his peers convicted Edrick Faust, standing in a court of law after days of testimony, after hearing evidence and cross-examination, after listening to arguments on both sides, and after doing, in our system, what a jury is asked to do. They weighed the facts, they followed the law, they reached a verdict, and that verdict was guilty on all 12 counts. Days later, Edrick Faust was sentenced to 2 life sentences plus 40 years for the commission of a crime with a knife. And before I say anything, I want to say these words: welcome back. Because before we even try to begin to put language around what this moment means, I need to acknowledge the weight of what we just heard. Because for Tara's family, this was not just audio on this podcast. It wasn't just a legal proceeding. It was not just another true crime update. This was the sound of a fight that has stretched more than 2 decades. This was the sound of a family who has carried grief, uncertainty, heartbreak, false starts, shattered hope, renewed hope, and unimaginable public scrutiny over the last 25 years. We encountered a lot of that together. This was the sound of a community finally hearing what Tara's loved ones should have heard a very long time ago: that her life mattered, that what was done to her mattered, and that the truth matters. It shows us that even when justice comes painfully late, my friends, it is still right on time. Welcome, welcome, welcome back to Classic City Crime. I'm your host, Cameron J. And friends, I have to tell you this. I have wrestled with this introduction more than most I have ever recorded. Because really, how do we begin an episode like this? How do you begin after 6+ years of a podcast walking alongside Tara's family? How do you begin after covering a case for so long, after speaking her name so many times, and after trying to honor her not just with content, not just as a headline, not just as a mystery for people online, but as a real woman with a real family who has loved ones that are now my loved ones, who miss her dearly, who defended her, and who fought for her every step of the way. And how do you begin after watching a verdict come down and then almost instantly watching the internet do what the internet does best, which is turn pain into performance and the truth into a game of who can shout the loudest? Well, after giving this much thought, I think I'm just going to start with gratitude. I want to begin by thanking you, all of our listeners, those of you who have stood beside us from the very beginning, those of you who have found us recently and took the time to listen, and those of you who cared, not just about headlines, but about Tara and her humanity. Those of you who understood that Tara Baker's story deserved care, patience, depth, and yes, dignity. Those of you who supported us when it was hard, when it was expensive, when it was draining, when it was lonely, and when the answers that we continued to seek never came, you are still there. I want to thank every single person in this community who refused to let Tara Baker be forgotten. I want to thank the people who prayed, who listened, who shared, who advocated, and who encouraged those who kept her name alive in the right ways. And I want to thank people who understood that following this case is not about entertainment. It is about memory. It is about accountability. It is about a woman whose life was stolen and a family who deserved the truth even if it took them far too long to reach it. And I especially in this moment want to acknowledge Tara Baker's family. There are no words sufficient for what they have endured, none at all. Not from law enforcement missteps over the years, not from the emotional whiplash of false leads and shifting theories, not from the rogue voices that inserted themselves into this story, not from the years of waiting, not from the trauma of the trial, not from the cruelty that followed the verdict. They, my friends, have been put through hell. And still, they kept going. They kept speaking Tara's name. They kept insisting that her life and death were worthy of real attention, real investigation, and the truth. This podcast has had the privilege of researching and telling this story alongside Tara's family for more than 6 years. Can you believe that? Her family, though, has sought justice for more than 2 decades. That matters, and that context matters. Because some of the ugliest things that I have watched happen in the aftermath of this verdict is people stepping in late, loudly, and dishonestly, pretending they are the ones asking the questions, pretending they are the only ones who care about fairness, pretending they discovered concern only once cameras showed up. Once the trial became a spectacle, they became an audience looking to perform. And I have no interest in softening that truth. There are people who said nothing when Edrick Faust was arrested more than a year ago. There are people who have said nothing for the last year while he sat in jail awaiting trial. There are people who said nothing during pretrial hearings that we all attended. Nothing through the motions, nothing through the legal wrangling, nothing through the actual hard, boring, procedural work of a criminal case. But once the spotlight turned on, once the clicks were available, and once the outrage economy smelled blood, suddenly everyone became an expert. Suddenly, everyone was a trial analyst or a forensic authority. Suddenly, everyone was a civil rights scholar, and suddenly everybody who had not put in the work, not read the record, not followed the case, not shown up, and not listened closely, while not respecting the family, not even understood basic procedural posture, decided they knew, and only they knew, what happened. And that, my friends, is in part why this episode matters so much. Because what we read online is almost never the full truth. Sometimes it's not even close. I'll say this, a courtroom is not perfect because human systems are not perfect. But a courtroom is still where claims are tested. It is where rules of evidence still matter. It is where witnesses are examined and cross-examined. It is where testimony is subject to challenge. It is where lawyers cannot simply invent whatever they want to and expect it to stand. It is where evidence has to survive scrutiny. You see, the internet is not built for this kind of discipline. The internet is built for speed, for reaction, for ego, for outrage, for selective hearing, and for clipping 10 seconds out of 10 hours and calling that a confession or understanding. And I need you all to hear me very clearly right now. The courtroom does not lie. Evidence does not lie. But let me tell you this, people can lie about evidence, yes. People can distort evidence. People can misunderstand evidence and they can spin it and cherry pick it. In fact, they can deliberately weaponize it for confusion, for clicks, and for attention-seeking behavior. But my friends, I'll say it again, evidence does not what? Lie. And if you have followed this case carefully, if you sat through the testimony, if you paid attention, if you understand the difference between admissible fact and social media theater, then you know exactly why that matters. Now, because this is the first episode post-trial, I want to say something directly about the jury. I have spoken with jurors, and I want to be very careful, very respectful, and very responsible in how I say that. But I think it's very important to say this because some of the ugliest and most reckless rumors after this verdict involved claims that the jury was pressured, that jurors were intimidated, that they were somehow bullied into their decision either by one another or by people who may have been in the courtroom audience. I am telling you plainly that the jurors I have spoken with have dispelled that, and it is a lie. They have dispelled the notion that race drove deliberations. They have dispelled the notion that the verdict was the result of external pressure. They've dispelled the notion that somebody strong-armed the room in a result. And that matters. It matters because these rumors do not just attack our verdict. They attack the integrity of citizens just like you and me, who were called to do an extraordinarily difficult duty. People love to say they want justice, but then when regular people actually sit in a jury box, listen, deliberate, and do their job, suddenly they are accused of being corrupt, weak, manipulated, racist, ignorant, or brought into some grand conspiracy if their conclusion does not align with an online narrative. That is not justice. That is disrespect. And since we're being honest, I'm just going to keep going a step further. Some of the people shouting the loudest about justice have shown very little concern for the safety of the people involved here. After this trial, I had to hire personal security. Chris Melton had to flee his home after gunshots. Tara's family has read lie after lie after lie. The jury list was publicly exposed by a man who claims to stand for justice, while apparently showing little regard for what public safety actually requires. This has all been reckless, my friends. It is cruelty dressed up as righteousness, and I am done pretending otherwise. And there are several rumors that I want to acknowledge directly, and it's not because they deserve oxygen, but because some of them have circulated so aggressively that silence begins to look like permission. So let me be plain, and you might chuckle at these things. No, I have not had a sexual relationship with anyone in the Baker family. No, I have not had a sexual relationship with Chris Melton, who was madly in love with Tara Baker. No, Chris Melton and I are not best friends. I met Chris as a result of this podcast, actually, and after one of the toughest interviews I've ever conducted, I reached my own conclusion that he was not the person who murdered Tara Baker. That is the truth. It is disgusting, like I said, that any of this has to be said aloud because it's degrading, it's insulting, it's cruel to Tara's family, cruel to me and Kyle, cruel to the integrity of this work, and cruel to any honest listener, you all, trying to make sense of what really happened. But this is literally the level to which our discourse has fallen. It has become so ugly, so conspiratorial, so detached from decency that people are inventing sexual relationships, secret loyalties, and hidden alliances because fantasy is easier for them than facing a verdict grounded in evidence. Another rumor that I want to address that I am not going to spend long on is the nonsense related to a now dead judge's son. What I can tell you is that that man was not and has never been a suspect in the murder of Tara Louise Baker. You have the wrong case, the wrong decade, and the wrong facts. And facts are not selective. That rumor traces back to confusion and speculation around a judge's son in an entirely different public storytelling, and people who repeat it in connection to this case are simply wrong. That name is not on the list of meaningful suspects in a case that spans more than 25,000 pages. People saying otherwise are not uncovering some hidden truth, they are recycling misinformation. And I also want to address the absurd claim that the Coleman Baker Act somehow made it politically necessary for us to solve Tara's case, or that it turned this investigation into some kind of performative political project. That is categorically false. When we worked alongside Eternal Vigilance Action, the Baker family, Natasha, and the Coleman family to help write and support that law, we actually never thought Tara's case would be solved because of it. That was not the spirit of our work. In fact, many of you joined us in that. And it was the spirit of legacy, the spirit of Tara's memory. And the spirit of that work was making sure that Tara Baker and Rhonda Sue Coleman were not only never forgotten, but that their murders would continue to affect change for others. This was about refusing to let them disappear. And yes, that law, the Coleman Baker Act, has had a lot of impact. Other cases have been solved. But to reduce it to political opportunism or to completely misunderstand it is to disrespect the people who poured pain, love, and purpose into making these women have a legacy that could not be left behind and that was bigger than their victimization. But now let's talk about the biggest claim of all, because it is one that has consumed the loudest corners of the internet. And I cannot hide from it. The fact that Edrick Faust was apparently railroaded by a racist criminal justice system and that Chris Melton is Tara's real killer. Well, there are several things that I need to say about this. First, I believe that two things can be true at once, and I've always acknowledged that here. Our criminal legal system in this country has absolutely, historically, and undeniably marginalized Black communities. That is true, that history is real, that injustice is real, and any honest person should be able to say it plainly. I've said it on this platform before. And it is also true that Black defendants, like Edrick Lamont Faust, can still be guilty of crimes when the evidence proves guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. I'm choosing my language carefully here because Tara deserves care even in how we speak about the worst things that happened to her. But let me tell you this, listeners, as respectfully as I can. The forensic evidence presented in court was not consistent with the internet fantasy that there was no meaningful evidence against Mr. Faust. That is not what the jury heard, and that is not what the courtroom record reflects. And of course, it's not what the jury said in their verdict. And as for the slogan that people keep saying, no house, no Faust, I have to say it plainly, slogans are not evidence, catchy is not credible, repetition is not proof, and chanting something does not make it true. I also want to say something that I feel very strongly about, again, trying to be very careful here. If people truly care about racial inequity in the criminal legal system, then we need to express the same outrage for unsolved homicides involving Black victims. Where is the energy for their underreported, underexamined, and often forgotten murders that devastate Black families and communities each year? Unresolved violence also disproportionately harms Black communities. And I reject the idea that the only racial justice lens available here is one that must automatically be deployed in the defense of a violent killer, all while ignoring Black victims whose cases never receive the same attention. I guess what I'm trying to get at here is that some people have tried to use race as a shield against evidence in ways that collapse complexity, silence the truth, and in ways that deserve to be challenged. I also want to touch on the interview clip circulating online that people claim was Miss Virginia Baker saying years ago that she knew who killed Tara, which wouldn't have been Faust at that time. I'm extremely protective of Miss Virginia. You all know this, so hear me when I say this. This family has been put through a nightmare that most of you nor me could ever imagine. Over the years, as we detailed in this podcast, investigators and others would sometimes come to the family with different theories, different names, different possible suspects, different narratives, different supposed breakthroughs. And sometimes these voices came from people with badges, yes. Sometimes they came from people adjacent to the case. Sometimes from people who had no business inserting themselves at all. So, yes, over the course of decades of trauma, confusion, grief, and false hope, there were times that family members felt led in different directions. That is to be expected, nor does it discount the verdict. This is not evidence of deceit by a grieving mother. This is evidence of what hell does to a family. This is what prolonged trauma looks like. This is what it looks like when people keep reopening a wound and telling a mother to look over here, or no, maybe look over there, no, maybe this person, no, maybe that person, all the while the evidence was there all along, waiting on the test. Those who are pitting Miss Virginia's pain against her should be ashamed of themselves. She has suffered enough. And finally, I want to say something about pretrial, because a lot of what the public does not understand and what they did not see were the things that happened before the trial ever began. There were motions, there were opportunities, there were rules, there were deadlines, there were strategic decisions, and there were multiple chances for the defense to file certain motions in certain ways if they wanted certain evidence to come in, and they did not. One of the most frustrating things online has been commentary after the verdict, seeing people speak as though these things were hidden or suppressed, when in reality, much of what they are upset about comes down to the fact that the defense attorney simply did not understand procedural law, admissibility standards, and doing what was necessary to tee up issues correctly. That is the fact. That may not be sexy enough for YouTube. It might not fit neatly in a rage clip, but it does matter. Trials are not freestyle performances. They are governed proceedings. And if you don't understand what happened before the jury was ever seated, you're often missing half, if not more, of the story. And that, too, is why I decided to do this episode. Because now, it's not just about justice for Tara. It's about truth for Tara. Truth that can stand up to scrutiny. Truth that does not need filters and graphics and manipulated clips to survive. Truth that can be tested. Truth that can be questioned and still remain standing. Truth is strong enough to endure cross-examination. Truth that is stronger than rumor. Truth stronger than ego. Stronger than any Facebook algorithm. And that brings me, my friends, to today's guest. Because if there is anyone I wanted beside me for this first post-trial conversation, it is my friend David Griffeth. David is not a late arrival to this case, nor is he a commentator who parachuted in when the cameras turned on. He is not one more person just trying to turn Tara's murder into his own platform. He is someone who at one point was a lead investigator on this case, someone who spent years with the file, years with the facts, and has dealt with the weight of this investigation. In fact, you may have read his recent article, No Reasonable Doubt, one he wrote to respond directly to the flood of misinformation and online rumor that exploded after the verdict came in. And in this episode, David and I are going to do what the internet has largely refused to do. We're going to slow down. We're going to talk carefully. We're going to talk honestly, yes. We're going to walk through the rumors, the accusations, the half-truths, the viral claims, the alternate suspect narratives, the procedural misunderstandings, the forensic distortions, and mostly the ugly noise that has surrounded this verdict. And we're not doing it for the drama. We're not doing it for the clicks. We're not doing it to win an internet fight. We are doing it for Tara. for her family, for you, our listeners who deserve better than the spin, for the people who have become exhausted by the lies. This episode is for the people who still believe that truth matters, even when it's inconvenient. In fact, especially when it's inconvenient. So I ask you to take a breath. Let's set aside the noise and let's get into it. David, first of all, thank you so much for taking time to come to the podcast. I think we've talked probably for 6 years now about Tara's case. Yeah.
Yep.
So tell listeners first, before we get into it, how you came to know about the Tara Baker case and your involvement therein.
Well, I was hired by the Athens Clarke County Police Department in November of 2004 as a crime analyst. I was living here in 2001 when Tara was killed. So I, being part of the community, I felt the anxiety associated with the unknown killing of Tara Baker, what happened.
Yeah.
So I lived through that.
Absolutely.
Personally, before I was at the police department.
Yeah.
And probably like everybody else, I, had lots of questions about what had happened by the time I got to looking at the case in 2005.
And it's quite a large case, as people might not understand just how big it is.
It is. It is, without a doubt, the largest case file that I worked on during my tenure at the police department.
Yeah, I've heard somewhere 25,000 pages.
I think that's inaccurate.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we have just gone through what might be the trial of the century, maybe something that none of us could have ever thought would occur with this case. What led you to write No Reasonable Doubt? This has circulated online. Even the district attorney has put out your article as a great source. What was the impetus behind you coming back on the scene all these years later with that?
At the point that I wrote that article, the only public voice after the trial in the interwebs was the LawTube voice.
Yeah.
And
because we were very nervous to say anything, right after the trial.
Right.
Sure.
So I just wanted to speak my truth. And if you look at what I write on my blog, I cover a wide range of topics, but I just wanted to add another voice.
Yeah. Yeah. And remind listeners, you too testified in this trial.
I did.
And
yes.
And you testified as a result of your investigation.
That's correct. Yeah. My role as a crime analyst, reviewing the case file for the state.
Before we get into all those claims we're seeing online, and friends, that's why we brought David Griffeth, both because of his familiarity with the case, yes, but also his No Reasonable Doubt, which we believe highlighted many of the rumors we'll talk about today and dispelled them, getting, of course, to the truth. We'll link that article, of course, in the description of this episode. But how complex was Tara Baker's case?
From a volume standpoint, in terms of case file and witnesses, it was very large and complex. But at the end of the day, the key piece of evidence that put us in a courtroom was the DNA evidence.
Yes.
And at the end of the day, that's pretty simple evidence.
Yeah. And I said this in our opening. I did not know the name Edrick Faust until 2024. Were you ever familiar with that name?
I was familiar with the name Edrick Faust, but not related to this case at all.
Yeah.
He had been part of the criminal justice system for years.
Yeah. And for those that are not aware, I believe it's something like 49 encounters with law enforcement since the age of 18. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean arrests, but certainly encounters with law enforcement over the course of those years. So, David, let's get into it. I want to first acknowledge we're two white dudes sitting here together today.
We are two white guys sitting here
Yes,
together.
I think that's very obvious. But one thing that has circulated online in the aftermath is truly that, Mr. Faust was an African-American male that is being railroaded by a racist criminal justice system. And so I'm curious, what your response to that has been and if you felt that played a role in the courtroom at all.
In America, I think it always plays a role in the courtroom, unfortunately. America's got a pretty sordid history of systemic racism. But let's break down what you just described piece by piece. So read it one more time and let's go through the parts.
Yeah. So first thing being that this conviction was solely based on racial bias.
I would say that's absolutely false.
Yeah.
And From my perspective as an analyst that worked on the criminal investigation, we looked at, if you look at the case file, there are hundreds of names that come up in the case file.
Yes.
And we looked at lots of potential suspects, and whether they were white, black, or another race, they got the same attention from investigators. I like to believe that the CID unit at the Athens Clarke County Police Department's colorblind in that respect. During my time there, I never saw systemic racism. During my time there, we largely worked for a police chief that was black and CID commanders that were black. And if you don't trust the white guys in the room, hopefully you trust the guys that were, and I'm talking about Jack Lumpkin, Charles Newsom. They were trailblazers in Athens.
And during this time, we have a sheriff, Ira Edwards, as well, for quite a long time, too.
So, no entity, no organization is going to be without some sense of bias. But I like to think that racism did not play a part in the investigation.
Well, it's like I say, too, we live in a world with social media and where the loudest, most extreme voices are the ones that are implicated, right?
Sure.
That would lead us to believe that two things can't be true at one time, and I'm just of the belief that they can, and that is, one, I can acknowledge that there are systemic issues in our system that disproportionately affect certain people, and certain people can still commit crime, and I think that's what happened in this case, too. David, there's been a lot of talk about the Athens DA or the judge lot, who I thought did a great job, by the way, or even politicians, because of the Coleman Baker Act, framed Mr. Faust, framed him. And I think that stems from, well, why didn't you find his match as a DNA match before now? What do you say to that?
So Tara Baker was killed 25 years ago, and DNA and the technologies around it, have evolved a lot in those 25 years. And at the end of the day, that's what it comes back to is 25 years later, they were able to use DNA amplification technology and true allele technology to put together a piece of the puzzle that they didn't have.
Yeah. And I mean, I would say that this case did not go under-investigated.
It did not.
Yeah.
It got lots of attention over 25 years.
Yeah. Well, let's get into it. The evidence. There is so much going on online about the evidence presented in this case, and I would argue perhaps a lot of that's coming from people who either did not watch the entire trial or, there's all these pretrial motions that the public wasn't a part of that led to a lot of the decisions made. But the first is, you heard it, no House, no Faust, claiming there's no DNA evidence placing Mr. Faust at 160 Fawn Drive. Your take?
So let me preface this by saying I did not watch the entire trial.
Yep.
Because I was a witness, and I'm not privy to the pretrial motions.
Yep.
But I can speak to the evidence that the DA presented. I think have a pretty good handle on everything that was presented at trial. Yeah. And let me lay out the crime scene for you. Tara Baker was killed in the morning on the 19th of January in 2001 as she was going about her normal daily routine as she got ready to go to class. And the timeline is pretty succinct. We know where Tara was the night before. She was at the law library studying. She went home that evening, and the last time anybody heard from her was a telephone call she made to a classmate that she'd been studying with that night.
Yep.
And then the next evidence we have is that she was up and going through her morning routine, which was almost a ritual for Tara if you talk to her friends and roommates. On the morning that she had class at 9:30 in the morning, she'd get up at 6:30 and she would eat a bowl of cheese grits. There was an empty bowl in the sink.
So she got that breakfast done.
She got that breakfast done. She'd go take a shower and get ready to go to class. And
How nice that class started at 9:30, not 8 o'clock.
right. So, Tara was found on her bedroom floor on top of the bath towel that was still moist, and her hair smelled of shampoo. Her morning routine from witness testimony was take her shower, and then she would dry her hair while sitting on the floor where her body was found.
Wow.
And so that's pretty good evidence.
Yeah.
You know, I've painted a picture, and everybody listening can envision what transpired.
Yeah.
We know that she was attacked, brutally attacked. It was a violent confrontation, and her body ended up splitting the footboard of the bed from the frame of the bed, and her body was laying between the end of the bed and that footboard.
Would you say it's a fair assessment with one investigator in the initial that said Tara Baker put up one hell of a fight?
I don't know how much of a fight she put up. I know that she was brutally beaten.
Yeah.
She took a stab wound to the neck that probably incapacitated her very quickly. There was no DNA evidence found under her fingernails, and she did not suffer a lot of defensive wounds. So I personally believe, and this is conjecture,
Sure,
that she was quickly subdued by her attacker.
No evidence of forced entry has been talked about a lot in this case over 25 years. You know, there was testimony in the trial from firefighters about a screen on her back window. I personally conjecture here, have always wondered about her bedroom window that was blown out by the fire. Do you have any indication on that? And the jury was not tasked with figuring out how he entered. What they were tasked with was burglary, meaning was he in the home without permission? But what is your thoughts on that?
Anything I offer related to that, it's going to be speculation and conjecture.
Sure.
And at the end of the day, I think you have to just make yourself comfortable with they're going to be unknowns, and you're just going to have to accept them.
Yeah.
And only 2 people know how Tara's killer got in her apartment.
Yeah.
Maybe only one person. She may not have realized he was coming. And until that person tells the truth, I don't know that we'll ever know.
This didn't come out in trial, but a lot was happening in Deer Park in 2001. There were, women that reported peeping Toms in the months leading up to Tara's death. There was a fire set not far from her home in the months, I believe less than a month before what happened at 160 Fawn Drive. Though this didn't come out in trial, I'm asking your opinion here, of course. Do you think those are related?
I do believe those are related, and especially one of those crimes. There was a crime during the Christmas break where a similar building in the neighborhood was subjected to an arson that was set in the same fashion, and the crime scene looked very similar. It just didn't have a dead body in it. And it almost foreshadows what happened in Tara's residence.
Yeah.
When you look at the elements of the 2 crime scenes, they're very similar.
Well, you talked about with this crime scene, the fire, the water damage, the smoke. I mean, there is a lot of unknowns about the how or when the entry happened. But let's talk about what evidence did come up in trial. What do you believe sealed the deal on this, and help listeners understand the evidence on the scene that did link Mr. Faust to the crime?
Okay. So let's look at the broad picture. I think the prosecution had 2 tasks to accomplish. During the pretrial motions, they were put on notice that the defense planned to use Chris Melton.
Which we'll get to later, y'all. Chris Melton, the boyfriend.
So they had to overcome Chris Melton as a suspect. And then they had to put forth the evidence that linked Edrick Faust to the crime scene. And the physical evidence that's really difficult to overcome is Edrick Faust's DNA was found on swabs that were taken at Tara's autopsy.
Mm-hmm.
So a standard rape kit was collected. And when we talk about a rape kit at autopsy, that includes swabbings of 3 orifices,
Mm-hmm.
the mouth, the vagina, and the anus or the rectum.
Mm-hmm.
So during that autopsy, those swabs were collected and preserved as part of the evidence collected in this case,
Thank goodness for that.
and well preserved.
Yeah.
When the GBI cold case got to looking at this case, they went back and looked at all the evidence and decided DNA technology's advanced far enough that we should retest.
And people don't understand this, David.
Right.
You can't just retest DNA every year. Correct?
You can't.
It'll destroy it.
It'll destroy it. There's a finite amount of it. So, and I can speak to the 15-year period that I worked on this case and what we did related to
Sure.
DNA. And,
That'd be great.
And there were decisions that had to be made about what are you going to subject the physical evidence to that's collected in this case that were difficult to make. At trial, there was a lot of talk about hairs that were collected during the course of the investigation. And
Which I always attributed to carpet is really hairy, and
right.
a big
Right. Go roll around on the carpet at
Yeah.
your house and see what you pick
Sure,
up on your black shirt.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a hair collected from Tara's buttocks at the crime scene.
Right.
That initially we thought was 2 hairs. It turned out to be a broken hair. So it was 2 pieces of the same hair. And at one point during the years, I want to say that it was 2006 or 7, we decided that there was some new DNA technology that might help us. And we sent one of those hairs out for mitochondrial testing.
Okay.
Now, that's basically they take the root of the hair and test the hair root DNA to try to make an identification. So that process destroyed that hair. And that was a tough decision to make.
Yeah.
Do you use the current technology and test the hair and destroy it and forego future technologies that may be better?
Tough call.
It is a tough call.
Yeah. Yeah. And so this was tested all these years later.
It was.
With true allele.
With true allele.
Yeah. And what we found was Faust in the places that were mentioned, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So the 3 swabs contain DNA across the 3 swabs from 3 individuals that were identified.
Yeah.
Those 3 individuals are Tara Baker, Chris Melton, and Edrick Faust.
So a
whose
lot
name
of
had not
people
come up.
online make a big deal about this third person's DNA, the victims.
Right.
Why was that so confusing to people, you think? And is that based on 412 rape shield law?
It may be confusing because of the 412 rape shield law. I didn't find it confusing. I did go back and watch that DNA testimony. That is the evidence that I was least familiar with. It happened after my time at the police department.
Yeah, yeah. Well, so no house, no Faust. Really, you would have to believe what? With his DNA being there.
I don't know.
How do you explain that away?
There's not a reasonable explanation for it. And that's where the guilty verdict comes from.
And maybe people, too, who haven't seen the crime scene photos, like the people in the courtroom or you and I have, that don't understand why his DNA might not have been found anywhere else. For example, why wasn't it on the knife? Why wasn't it on the cord that was used as a ligature or on the stove? Why not?
So DNA has to survive in the environment that it's left in. And the environment that Tara Baker's body was subjected to and the crime scene was subjected to was very severe. It was a very hot fire that burned for probably several hours. And then firefighters came in and washed that scene down with lots of water. And those 2 things are very detrimental to DNA surviving.
Let's stay on DNA for a little bit. A lot of people find this confusing. One claim that DNA evidence is unreliable or junk science. What do you think about that?
I think everybody that's of sound mind and reasonable mind understands that DNA is the best evidence that you're going to find at a crime scene.
Absolutely.
Now, interpreting that DNA is open for interpretation, but I don't know that you'll find better evidence. It uniquely identifies each of us.
Yeah. Claims of chain of custody contamination or the swabs being mislabeled. We learned of a mislabeling happening in the trial. Does that happen on occasion? I know it must be unfortunate when it does.
It does happen on occasion. I think the expectation that humans operate with perfection is the ideal, but they don't. And I think the mark of honesty and justice is represented by the fact that the law enforcement agencies involved told the story of the mislabeled evidence.
There was no hiding that.
There was no hiding it.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, there was a reasonable explanation for what happened with the evidence. For those of you that don't know, the swabs collected during the autopsy were immediately slides were made from those swabs, and then those swabs were put away to preserve for the future technology that might have come along.
When the case occurred in 2001, and when you looked at it, was there belief, even without DNA matching at that time, that a sexual assault had occurred?
Absolutely.
Yes. Okay. Just wanted to make sure on that. Some people claim online that, and I hate to bring this up, that no semen was found in Tara, and I believe they're basing this perhaps on the testimony of Mr. Falzone, who conducted the original autopsy. I took something different away from that. I'm curious what you took upon reflection post-trial.
So I think that the average layperson's that's confused about that's misinterpreting exactly what was testified to. I'm not going to go into the DNA expert's testimony. I'll let it speak for itself. If you want to see it, go watch it. But what I will say is I'll offer a question, and you come up with a reasonable answer. Edrick Faust's DNA was found in Tara Baker's mouth and in Tara Baker's vagina. What DNA do you think might have gotten there, and under what circumstances do you believe that it may have gotten there? And I think you'll answer the question yourself if you ponder those two questions.
And we know Chris Melton's DNA was found in Tara's vagina and anus.
That's correct.
This was a confusing point for one member of the jury. We will bring this up at a later time with our audience about our conversations with Tara's jury. But why do you think Chris's DNA was still present? We know the answer. I just would like you to talk about it.
Sure.
And specifically, what were your thoughts on the theory of drainage and transfer?
So the DNA we're talking about is semen. You would expect that Tara Baker and Chris Melton had sexual relations, looking at them from the outside, and there was testimony from Chris Melton that indicated that they did. So finding Chris Melton's DNA in the three orifices we're talking about is reasonable to a degree.
Sure.
So let's talk about the degrees.
Yeah.
So DNA's got a finite life, and it's unique in each of those three orifices. In the mouth, it's reasonable for semen to survive hours, single hours in the mouth. In the rectum, it's reasonable that it might be single days. In the vagina, the life is expected to be longer. The survivability is longer. And that's just a function of human biology. The mouth is constantly secreting saliva and constantly washing itself out.
Brushing your teeth every day.
Right.
Yeah.
Drinking fluids, eating food. I don't need to go into the details of how the rectum works for the audience, but you understand that. The vaginas, of the three orifices, that's where DNA is going to survive the longest. And it's reasonable to believe, and the testimony in this case was Chris Melton and Tara Baker saw each other the weekend before she was killed. They had sexual relations that weekend. And it's reasonable to believe that Tara Baker's vagina might contain the DNA material of Chris Melton.
Mm-hmm.
And we know that Tara Baker was brutally raped from the physical condition of her body.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to get real graphic, but she had severe contusions and damage around her vaginal and anal area.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't take a huge leap of faith for anybody that looks at those crime scene photos, reads that autopsy report, and hears that testimony to understand that the person that raped her may have transferred Chris Melton's DNA material to her anus from her vagina.
Yeah, that is what I gathered from it as well. So let's just go through these claims again real quick. Multiple male DNA profiles, yes, and as we just said.
You expect Chris Melton's to be there.
And it seems there, David, Faust DNA overwhelming compared to Chris Melton as well.
Right. Yeah, if you look at the quantities and the mathematical numbers discussed in that testimony, there's really only one conclusion you can come to.
That's right. That's right. Well, let's talk about a big courtroom moment. Mr. Cruz brought some envelopes.
He did.
To some witnesses that were empty and led to this major online speculation that evidence had been tampered with, was missing, or was not reliable. Let's talk through that.
So I did not see this testimony, but I've heard tell of it. So some envelopes that were used to store hairs were opened and contained nothing. The hairs were not unaccounted for. If you continued to watch the trial, you got an accounting for the hairs.
Mm-hmm.
They were processed, put on slides, or consumed by DNA testing.
Yeah.
So there were no missing hairs.
No missing hairs. Now, a lot of people talking about CODIS. CODIS, of course, being the national database of, criminal DNA submissions. And people are just so confused about CODIS's role in this. Why his DNA was in CODIS. Let's talk about that, because this didn't come up in trial, that Mr. Faust had a robust criminal history.
Right. So the short version of the story is CODIS is a national database of DNA profiles. And as you go in and out of the prison system, your DNA may be collected based on state and federal laws.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Faust is a felon, and his DNA was collected as part of that routine process.
Mm-hmm.
And convicted felons have their database put into CODIS, and CODIS is used by investigators to search known DNA profiles.
Mm-hmm.
And that's ultimately what happens in this case.
Yeah.
In 2024, the GBI retest the swabs taken at autopsy. There's an unknown DNA profile during that testing.
Mm-hmm.
They had Tara Baker and Chris Melton's DNA. It was known DNA.
Mm-hmm.
Tara Baker's collected at autopsy. Chris Melton's collected during the course of the investigation. They had a third unknown profile, and they ran that through CODIS, and CODIS comes back and says that's the DNA of Edrick Faust.
Mm-hmm. And there we have it. There we have it. And you know what's so fascinating to me, David, is it's not like the GBI reached into a bag of marbles when that match was made and happened to pull out one that lived 500-ish feet away.
Right. And I can't quote the math off the top of my head.
Sure.
It's a number bigger than we can fathom, 85 quintillion.
Yeah. A lot of zeros.
Lots of zeros. But not enough humans have lived on the planet that there is any doubt
mm-hmm.
that was Edrick Faust's DNA that was found in Tara Baker's body. Not at the crime scene, not on the surface of something. That DNA was found inside Tara Baker's body.
Yeah. And Tara Baker's victimology does not indicate someone who would be having an affair with her boyfriend sexually.
It does not. And, the victimology of rape victims shouldn't matter at all.
Sure. Sure.
The crime is the rape.
Mm-hmm.
The victim doesn't deserve it no matter what the victimology is.
Which happened a lot in this case,
right.
Tara being re-victimized.
Right. Tara's victimology was one that was very easy for investigators to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
She was not likely to be the victim of a crime. That's the bottom line assessment.
Mm-hmm.
And she was not likely to have been sleeping around. She had a very routine element to her day-to-day existence that was very predictable. People knew something was wrong when she didn't show up for class at 9:30 in the morning.
Yeah.
And that speaks to
A devoted student.
She was a devoted law student.
Yeah. A lot has been made online about prosecutorial and judicial misconduct in this case. There's been critiques of the fact that the prosecutor lied about Faust's DNA. I think he did not. It was quite clear that forensic evidence was misrepresented. I think, like you mentioned, it was pretty black and white. But there is this belief that the defense was unfairly treated and held in contempt for violating a judge's order multiple times, by the way. This wasn't a contempt happening that was just off the fly. Do you think the courtroom was a fair place in this trial?
I did not watch all the trial.
Right.
But I'm familiar with the aspects of the trial that we're talking about. What I will say is that we live in the greatest country on the planet, and we may not have a perfect judicial system. We have a very good judicial system. And one aspect of that judicial system is every defendant deserves a competent defense attorney, deserves a competent defense lawyer. And the court system will review that in the coming weeks, months, and years. And it's going to be up to that judicial system to make that determination. I personally don't feel like that anything unfair happened to the defense or the defendant during the course of this trial. But my opinion doesn't matter.
Yeah. Well, one thing that is an opinion that a lot of people have is opinions about Chris Melton. Tara Baker's long-term boyfriend, 2+ years of official dating, knowing each other longer, a friend of the podcast, certainly cleared long before this trial ever came to be. But do you think it was difficult that the prosecution had to spend so much time on Chris Melton and making sure the jury understood he was not responsible?
It was very unfortunate
Yeah.
that the prosecution had to spend so much time on it.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was absolutely necessary that the prosecution do it. And I hate it for Chris Melton because Chris Melton's been victimized over and over and over the course of 25 years.
Yeah.
Anybody that looks at the evidence as it relates to Chris Melton is going to come to the same conclusion, I believe. And you don't have to take my word for it. You can go back and watch the trial and look at the parade of people that came through and testified to those facts.
Even if you didn't believe Chris Melton.
Even if you didn't believe Chris Melton. I've got no reason to believe Chris Melton. I was as skeptical as anybody. And I think every investigator that picked up this case file started by looking at Chris Melton.
I started that way.
Right.
It was the logical first step.
Almost without a doubt, the majority of murders against females are committed by a male that's known to them. And it's usually a significant other. I think the metrics are somewhere to the tune of 80% of female homicides are committed.
Do you think that's why the public struggled so much with understanding and trying to rationalize the fact that Edrick Faust was unknown to Tara?
Sure. I think Edrick Faust represents the monster that everybody fears and hopes does not exist. At the end of the day, Edrick Faust is that monster. And just for the people that are watching that don't know, Chris Melton, the investigation has a very finite timeline for the time of death for Tara Baker, despite what the defense would want you to believe. Tara Baker was killed somewhere. She took her last breath around 9:30 in the morning that morning. Chris Melton was on video in a bank an hour away at the time Tara Baker took her last death, or somewhere close to that bank, en route to it or just leaving it. And there's no denying that. Chris Melton was on video in the bank. Multiple witnesses testified to that. And at the end of the day, to believe that Chris Melton committed this crime, Chris Melton would have had to have some magic power that would bend time and space.
Police, the claims are that police for 25 years have looked for every reason not to have Chris Melton be the person who did this. My understanding through conversations with him is that he was grilled multiple times throughout multiple iterations of this investigation.
For years,
Yeah.
different investigators came back to Chris Melton and asked him to give his statement again, talked to him again, reviewed the evidence, right up until Liz had her last interview with him before Edrick Faust was known to be the suspect. And I think if you go back and you look at that interview between the GBI and Chris Melton, and you put it in the known context that it's taken place, I think even the GBI agents are once again wondering, is it possible to put Chris Melton into this crime as the offender?
And a lot has been made about he and Tara's relationship. Was it on the rocks? Was it going bad? You investigated this case. Did you ever find any indication that things were awry or that Tara was, seeing other people? Any of that?
Never.
Never.
I don't have any reason to believe that Chris Melton and Tara Baker had anything but a wonderful relationship that they hope would continue on in the future.
A lot was made in this trial about Chris Melton's hands. Detective Ricketts testified they were not that way the night of the murder. Was that what your investigation showed as well?
It was, and I've known Billy Ricketts a long time. I've got faith in what Billy Ricketts says. I've known John Newton a long time. Both of them were in a position to notice Chris Melton's hands the day of the homicide and the next day, and never has their statement wavered in any way, shape, or form between all three of them. So
there's a clip going around that you've probably seen where people claim Chris Melton confessed on the stand that he said, "I did not want to see the damage I caused." That's not what I heard. That's not what my subtitles typed out. That's not what the court reporter wrote. What did you hear?
I did not hear that.
Yeah.
But I think you can chalk that up to LawTube and the interwebs and the fascination with taking facets, pieces of evidence, and contorting them to fit your own narrative. And that's exactly what happened there, I believe.
Yeah. I mean, you can manipulate anything.
You can
these
manipulate
days and age.
anything.
Please, no one do that with this, but we'll see what happens. Also claims that Melton's hair was found on the printer cord, the ligature.
So Chris Melton and Tara Baker were in a long-term relationship, and he was frequently in her apartment. It would not be out of character. It would not be surprising to find Chris Melton's hair at the crime scene.
Along with roommates. Their hair was found.
Along with roommates.
Exactly. Why not Faust's hair?
So when you look at a crime scene, I think when you look at the trace evidence that you would pick up off the carpet, and in this case, most of it was picked up off of Tara's body. As they rolled her body over, they collected the hairs that she was picking up off the carpet.
I see.
So the hair that you're going to find there is the hair that falls off during the normal course of your day-to-day routine in that apartment. So you expect the occupants that are most frequently there to be represented in those samples.
Some people ask if Chris Melton ever took a polygraph. These are not admissible in court, of course, but they are often used as an investigative tool.
They are. And do you know the answer to the question? I'm just curious.
I don't.
Chris Melton took a polygraph.
And he
passed the polygraph.
He passed the polygraph. And was that during your time?
It was prior to my time.
Okay. Chris
Melton was probably one of the most cooperative persons of interest in a murder investigation that I've
He's just
ever
a good
worked.
old boy, just a
not
everyday
only was
guy.
a good old boy, but he was on a mission to find Tara's killer, and he was willing to do anything that the police department asked of him. I think most criminal defense attorneys would be shocked and would have told their clients, no, don't talk to them again. Chris Melton never reached out for counsel. He was always cooperative. And he was subjected to years and years of investigation.
I always have said, David, that if anyone could have been found out if they did this, it would have been Chris Melton. With the amount of investigation, the amount of interviews, the amount of reinvestigations that occurred.
At the end of the day, when you look at the timeline in this case, you can only come to one conclusion. Chris Melton could not have killed Tara Baker.
Yeah. There were other suspects. This was a true whodunit case for a long time. Some might describe it that way. I won't put words in your mouth. I described it that way. We, as a podcast, of course, look back only at those that were mentioned in the media over the course of 25 years, but you've mentioned there were hundreds of other names that were just looked at. There are claims that not only Chris, but other suspects could have been stronger as an alternative than Faust. Do you agree with that?
Ask that question one more time. I want to make sure that I've got it.
Yeah, people claim that, other suspects such as Tara's classmate or, the maintenance man at Deer Park were responsible for the crime, and that they, too, had the defense done a shoddy defense on them would have been stronger than Faust.
It goes back to the DNA. And, and you've got to provide a reasonable explanation for the DNA to believe that Edrick Faust did not kill Tara Baker. And there is no plausible explanation that explains Edrick Faust's DNA being in Tara Baker's body other than he raped and killed her.
Yeah. And you've seen the case file, David. Investigators did not ignore those other persons of interest, did they?
We did not. You've got to remember this investigation went on for 23 years in the absence of having a DNA profile. And investigators went to great lengths over the course of those 2 decades to try to make sense of what happened to Tara Baker. And many persons of interest came up during the course of those 20 years. It wasn't hundreds of persons of interest.
Oh, I see.
But
sure.
Hundreds of names in the case file, whether it be statements, witnesses, tips called in, neighbors, persons of interest. But lots of people were looked at as potential suspects.
One rumor that I think has given a lot of fuel to the fire on this case is the fact that the media in 2001 ran with the story of a white male running from Tara's house that morning. In fact, when I started my podcast, that was the only eyewitness account I could find in newspapers. It wasn't until neighbors in Deer Park started coming forward that had talked to police that I learned that most people saw an African-American gentleman in the neighborhood that morning. Where do you think the white male running comes from? You probably have investigated that lead.
I know where the white male testimony comes from. That white male, I believe we definitively identified that white male.
Okay.
I'm not going to disclose his identity. There's no evidence that he killed Tara Baker. He was a person of interest for a long time. There's no physical evidence that ties him to the crime scene. And at the end of the day, the only physical evidence tying a suspect to the crime scene is Edrick Faust's DNA.
Yeah. It was also my understanding that the white male running from the house physical description did not even match Chris Melton's.
It does not match Chris Melton's.
Yeah. So that just want to clear that up for everyone as well. Help people understand the difference between rumor and a viable suspect, a viable lead. I think that's what people really miss here. And that's what the podcast, admittedly, had the flexibility to do that you did not as a law enforcement officer.
I wouldn't say that we didn't have the flexibility to investigate.
Sure.
We dealt with lots of rumors over 2 decades related to this case, and we followed up on those rumors to substantiate them or exclude them. And lots of homicides get solved by rumor mills, no doubt.
Yeah. TK Hardy, 1977.
Right. But lots of every homicide has rumors that circulate that do not turn out to be true or not related to the crime in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah. Well, this next section I want to go through, these are claims that have been online about the physical evidence, about the crime scene. Let's see. The first is there was a latex glove found with Melton's DNA at the crime scene. Is that true or false?
That's false.
I never heard that either. That bathroom plumbing was removed from Tara's apartment and that Chris Melton was the reason for that.
Some plumbing was removed from the apartment.
Mm-hmm.
Chris Melton was not the reason for that. That was just part of good investigators doing what good investigators do.
Would that be to see if there was hair or things in the drain?
Right. So we know that Tara Baker took a shower shortly before she was killed. And so they took the drain assembly from Tara's house with the hopes that maybe there would be some evidentiary value to the contents of the drain assembly. There was not.
There was not. The deadbolts were intact. That is true.
The deadbolts. So I'll go through the deadbolt testimony.
Yeah.
Because I think it's important. And I'll say right up front, we still to this day cannot account for how Edrick Faust entered the house or exited the house with certainty.
Right.
What I can tell you is when firefighters made entrance to the house, they did it through the front door by forcing the front door open and knocked the deadbolt out of the door jamb because it was engaged and locked.
Got it.
And multiple firefighters testified that they had to throw the deadbolt open on the back door to open the back door and ventilate the structure.
Yep.
So both deadbolts were intact.
Wow. And backdoor window entry theory. Think that's the best one?
So there's lots of speculation about the back window.
Excuse me, back window, correct?
Right.
Yeah.
The back window that made up the dining area it was a combined kitchen dining area.
Mm-hmm.
And we spent a lot of time internally deliberating at the police department if that back window was the point of ingress or egress for the killer. There are a lot of opinions. I personally don't believe that window was used to enter or exit the structure, but that's conjecture and personal opinion. I base my opinion on, and you can do this, you can look at the crime scene photos. The window shade appears intact and is not disturbed. It's in the down position.
I noticed
There's
that.
some delicate items on the table right in front of the window that look undisturbed to me. I don't know how you could exit that window and leave that table in the condition that was in when they took crime scene photos.
It's always been my belief, just like you're saying, it's not a fact. Based on the other happenings in Deer Park that we previously discussed, that her bedroom window might be more likely. Your thoughts?
I think it's possible. At the end of the day, I'm comfortable resigning myself to I may never know unless Edrick Faust tells me.
Yeah, and that's a point, too, on the why this happened as well, which we can get to our own thoughts on that in a bit. There's also discussion online about the fact that in 2001, Miss Baker claimed that she was told Tara left DNA under her fingernails, and that never came out in trial. And to my understanding, I've not heard of them at all.
So,
I noticed her hands were burned as well. Very
One of
badly.
her hands was significantly burned.
Yeah.
So the first day that I met Virginia Baker was on the 5th anniversary of Tara's death at the UGA Arch. They were doing a memorial service. And she relayed to me, and it's a very memorable occasion for me, that an investigator at the police department had told her that Tara left us a gift, were her words, under her fingernails. She fought and were sure that her the killer's DNA is under her fingernails. As part of the crime scene processing, fingernail clippings were taken by some very competent crime scene investigators. And during that process, they trimmed her nails, collected those trimmings, and they went to the crime lab. They do that to preserve any evidence that might be collected, which is a common place for evidence to be collected from in rape investigations.
Sure.
There was no DNA other than Tara Baker's found under her fingernails.
You think it was a statement of hope?
I think it was a statement of hope.
Mm-hmm.
It's a hearsay statement.
Sure. Hence why, we never heard it in court.
Right. The investigator that supposedly made that statement, it's now deceased, so he can't speak for himself. I believe Virginia Baker speaks exactly what she believes is the truth, and something to that effect was probably said to her.
Yeah. Also, too, David, I think people forget, and I jokingly told you this one time, I wish every investigator had been like you and the two that you worked with, Courtney Gale and Sean Potter. Thankful for their work on this as well. But, over the years, Miss Baker learned different theories that some investigators thought could have happened and who might have done it. There was an article that came out in 2005, 2008, making the rounds where Virginia and Lindsay Baker claimed to know who killed Tara. I don't think people understand how many times they had to relive Tara's death and the possibility of who might be involved. Can you speak to that?
So I can speak to that as the parent of a child of about Tara's age.
Yeah.
And I can only imagine what Virginia and Lindsay Baker went through. They were tormented for decades over the death of a child that they love very much. And in the absence of information and not knowing, the mind can only speculate. And
the mind's a powerful thing.
Mind's a powerful thing. And having had conversations with both of them about what they thought might have happened, there was lots of speculation in that void. Just like there was lots of speculation in the investigators.
And in my own work.
Sure.
Too.
That's just the nature of the homicide investigation. It's a very difficult thing to investigate. Often there are only two people that know what transpired.
Yeah.
The killer and the victim.
Yeah.
And the victim can't speak to what happened.
My goodness, you're so right about that. But my goodness, she keeps, making effects posthumously, which is so remarkable. Through the Coleman Baker Act, we saw, listeners, just yesterday, a 16-year cold case of an African-American lady in Clarke County solved. Let's talk about the laptop. This is a big discussion online because it was reportedly the only thing investigators saw missing from the crime scene. Some people think it burned up in the fire. Some people think it was stolen. Some people were like, why would Mr. Faust steal it? Someone personal should have stolen it, not a stranger. Your thoughts on the laptop?
So we don't know what happened to the laptop, and we may never know. But from a property crime standpoint in 2001, the most valuable thing as a general rule that you could take from an abode would have been a laptop.
No iPhone 16s laying
There was no
around.
iPhone 16 laying around. There were no flat screen TVs at the time. It was an item that was commonly stolen in burglaries because it was a high value item that was sought after by the streets. I don't know what happened to the laptop. I hope one day we figure it out.
I had someone suggest once it could have just simply been a way to victimize again. Just taking something of high value like that.
I think there are lots of reasonable explanations for the missing laptop. I think the most probable one is it was a high dollar item, and it was part of a burglary motivation.
Let's move into a few things related to the limitations in this case, too. And, for the general public's knowledge, I attended many pretrial hearings in this case. And what I want to make sure people know is that while in the courtroom the theatrics were that the judge was limiting the defense, I would argue that when the cameras weren't there and pretrial motions were happening, that the judge was very amenable to the defense and actually tried to help them over and over again file the appropriate motions to bring in evidence that they wanted to. So, anyway, the point being, David, the defense called no witnesses. The air sucked out of the room in that moment. And before we get into it, the burden is not on the defense. It's on the state to prove their case.
Sure.
Juries cannot say that because he didn't defend himself, he's guilty.
Correct.
But what do you make of him not calling any witnesses?
I think everyone was surprised that no witnesses were called, and I can't speak for the defense and why they didn't call any witnesses. I would ponder a question. What witness could you put up that could explain what happened in that home other than Edrick Faust? I don't believe anybody else was there.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's reasonable that you put Edrick Faust on the stand if I put myself in the shoes of the defense counsel.
Usually advised against, yeah.
Right. So it may just simply be a function of they had nobody to put up.
Yeah.
But again, that's speculation on my part.
Sure. And for those who might not know, too, you might wonder, why didn't the defense point the finger at other persons of interest in the case? There's something called some other dude did it defense. It's called a Saudi motion. And really, you have to prove that there is a viable alternative in that person to point the finger at them in the first place.
Right. And that was part of the pretrial motions
Yes.
that went on in the
Yes.
weeks ahead. And I'll speak to that by saying that I believe Lisa Lott's a very good judge. For those that don't know, Lisa Lott used to be a public defender
That's
before
what
she was a judge.
is remarkable about her career.
So I don't think that most of the people that know and operate in and around her would classify her as a state-biased judge.
Yeah. In fact, she ran on a platform that was quite progressive and even was talked about at the time judicially about its appropriateness. But nonetheless, I think she does a great job, too.
I believe she does. I think she did a great job in this trial. And, the appeals process exists for a reason, and they'll
Absolutely.
sort through all of those questions, and we'll know in the future.
June 12th, a hearing in the court of the Superior Court here in Athens, Clarke County with the Honorable Judge Lisa Lott. David, one final evidence piece that I think people are making up, and I have read now the toxicology report from Tara Baker. Was Tara Baker using drugs or alcohol overwhelmingly?
Tara Baker was not using drugs or alcohol overwhelmingly. There was no indication of alcohol or substances in her blood.
Yeah.
What is notable from her autopsy as it relates to this crime, and it's important for the timeline, is Tara Baker was probably alive as the fire burned. At autopsy, they found some soot in her larynx that indicates that she was taking breath while the fire was burning in her home. It was not the cause of death. The cause of death in autopsy is attributed to strangulation and knife wounds. One knife wound in particular.
Yeah.
But the autopsy reports indicate that she was alive as the fire burned.
It's difficult thing to even think about.
It is. But it eliminates a lot of speculation about her time of death.
Yeah. Yeah. And there, too, was a clock melted as well on the wall, I believe.
There
around
was.
the same time
There
of
was.
9:30.
I think the clock's probably the best indicator of her time of death. The clock was known to be working. It was fairly new, and it's frozen in time, impacted by the immense heat from the fire.
Before we get into some listener questions, they had plenty, and we only are going to ask those, of course, that were not covered by things we've already talked about. So before we get there, though, I think, like I said, the biggest problem people have is I can't get past how this stranger could do this. And the mind of a killer is something that I'm sure you've studied, I've studied in school. motive?
So, when behavioral analysts classify homicides, they usually attribute some motive in the classification process. And this homicide was classified as a disorganized sexual homicide by investigators.
Do you think the intent was to kill?
The intent was to kill, and the intent was to rape.
Mm.
And it was very intentional. And at the end of the day, I think there's no explanation for depraved mind other than it's just pure evil.
Yeah. Evil encountered a good example of good that day is what I've always said. All right, listener questions. Number one, this might be one you and I aren't totally qualified to answer, but I have some thoughts on it. Did the focus on Chris Melton during the trial create grounds for him to pursue legal action?
So I think if I was Chris Melton, I would be very upset by the online commentary.
It's been terrible.
It's been terrible. And I think there may be grounds for him to pursue legal actions against some of the commentary online.
What I would tell people is I had to be very careful with my words over the last 6 years. You never accuse anyone of anything. It's all alleged or reported or according to, and I am certainly watching as well what happens outside of the courtroom. A lot of people might not know this, but an attorney can point at another person of interest in a trial. They are not allowed to do that outside of the courtroom without implication as well.
For the people that would go around and say definitively that Chris Melton killed Tara Baker, you're playing a very dangerous game.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, there is no evidence that indicates Chris Melton killed Tara Baker, despite the smoke and mirrors that the defense put up in this case.
Yep.
At the end of the day, when you look at it, there is not a stitch of evidence to show that.
Yeah. Let's see. Peggy asks who identified the DNA as belonging to Faust. We've kind of talked about this, but my understanding is the GBI sent this to a lab or their own lab, perhaps?
So the DNA was processed by a lab, but it was actually the CODIS database that pointed the finger at Edrick Faust. And the CODIS database has no implicit bias.
And the jury was not told that this was a criminal database, correct?
They were not.
They were told a national database.
Right. And that was to keep from subjecting the jury to the known fact that he was a convicted felon.
Yes, and for those who are watching now, the jurors that I have had the pleasure of speaking with were not even aware of his criminal history until we spoke on the phone. They had purposefully not even looked up the case after the trial, probably wanting a break after those 3 difficult weeks. Are there any rumors or facts supporting the jury felt pressured or afraid? David, I think this might be one for me. I can tell you the jurors I've spoken with, they did not feel pressured, they did not feel afraid, and they have resolve in their decision. I saw no pressures in the courtroom. As a witness, did you?
I did not spend a lot of time in the courtroom, so I cannot speak to that. But I have faith in the judicial system, and if there was pressure put on a juror, I believe that will come out in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned this already. Was a motive ever clearly established? You believe disorganized, sexually motivated homicide?
I do.
And can you tell people what disorganized means for those who don't understand crime classification?
I can. So violent crimes are typically classified as either organized or disorganized, and that speaks to the manner in which the crimes committed and what tools were brought to bear. In this case, the killer didn't bring the murder weapon. He sourced it from the scene. He didn't bring a rape kit or a murder kit. He used items in the house to commit his crimes, and that's what we would use to classify it as disorganized. There was not an organized effort to facilitate the crime by bringing tools with them.
Do you think this behavior, and I know this is asking you to provide some conjecture here, but Do you believe this behavior was, induced by drugs? Or do you believe that, and I'd say that we do have, evidence that Faust was engaged in that behavior over the course of his life, or psychopathy, something much deeper?
I can't speak to what motivated the killer to do
Yeah.
what he did. I
It's
think
really
it's reasonable.
unfathomable.
It
Yeah.
is. I think it's reasonable to speculate that either one of those may have played a role in this crime.
Yeah. This is one about testimony, but you investigated it. Why did it take so long for the fire to become visible? And thanks to Callie for that.
I did not see it, but I understand that there was an expert witness
Yep.
put up by the state that spoke to the dynamics of fire. In a previous life, I was a firefighter,
Hmm.
and I'm very familiar with fire, and it was discussed a lot during this investigation. Investigators in general think that this fire was starved for oxygen, and
All the doors were
the
pulled
doors were
shut,
closed to the
windows
bedroom.
closed.
So at some point, the fire consumed all the oxygen it could get to in the room and kind of died out until it broke through the ceiling. So it
Mhm.
smoldered probably for several hours.
As
Um,
reported by people hearing but not seeing
right.
a fire,
So
or
multiple
smelling but
people
not.
smelled
Yeah.
smoke.
Yeah.
And when you put up the timeline, it'll very definitively show when 911 was called, I'm sure. And at the end of the day, I entered the criminal justice system, law enforcement in particular, being very skeptical of law enforcement operations.
I started this podcast that way.
Right. And 15 years later, I left the agency I worked for, very convinced that there are lots of good people working to see justice.
Mhm.
And I believe justice was found in this case. It took a long time to get there.
Mhm.
I don't believe that racism played a part in the verdict. There is not a grand conspiracy theory explanation that explains what happened here.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, it was just one evil person committing a very evil crime,
Mhm.
and the evidence points to that person.
Yeah.
And the jury saw that.
Mhm. And for those who have asked, we were not able to report on jury demographics during the course of the trial. But the final jury, the 12-member jury, was made up of 9 white individuals, 2 African Americans, and 1 Hispanic individual. The alternates were 2 African American individuals and 1 white gentleman. So truly a jury of one's peers, about half women, half men as well. So, David, first thing I want to say is thank you. Thank you for your work on Tara's case. So many people have worked on it over the years, but our work together and talks together have always led me to believe that, we would see resolution to this one day. Never thought it would be this way. I thought, it might be someone confessing sometime, but grateful for science. And I know the Baker family is so grateful to you too.
I'm very sorry that they had to endure what they endured. I'm very sorry that it took so long for them to find justice for Tara. I'm very happy that 25 years later it's been found.
Mm-hmm.
I believe justice was found.
Yeah.
And I think people can look at this case as testimony that the criminal justice system is sound, despite all of the interweb conspiracy theories and rumor mill. And if you doubt that, the entire trial is online, and you can go watch it from beginning to end.
It absolutely is. I definitely recommend avoiding those that add commentary on top of it.
I do. I agree.
And of course, we too will continue to bring updates on this case because, as you mentioned, it is not over.
It's not over.
There will be an appeal process that will take place. But my opinion, David, there are 2 things that will never change, regardless of where this appeal goes. And that is, number 1, that Edrick Faust DNA was inside of Tara Baker's body. And number 2, that he denied ever knowing her.
And I think it's really that simple.
Well, David, thank you so much for joining the podcast, and thank you for your commitment not only to Tara, but to her family and to this community. We thank you so much for that. And to you, everybody listening, I want to leave you with this. My belief in this verdict has not wavered, not for 1 second, actually. Not after hearing the evidence, not after speaking with the jurors, not after seeing the lies spread online, and not after the threats, the slander, the intimidation, the smear campaigns, or the absolute circus that has followed this trial. My belief has not wavered because my belief is not built on rumor. It is not built on internet personalities, nor edited clips, fake outrage, or people who showed up late and decided to rewrite reality for attention. My belief is based on evidence. It is built on testimony from sitting in uncomfortable courtroom pews. It is built on what happened at our courthouse. And as I have said before and will keep saying again, the courtroom does not lie. Evidence does not lie, but people may lie about it. People may distort it, manipulate it, clip it, spin it, and package it for their own audience, but the evidence stays the same. And that is why this podcast is no longer simply on a quest for justice, because justice has now spoken. This podcast is now on a question for the truth about what happened to Tara Louise Baker, the truth about what happened in that courtroom, the truth about what the public has not yet been told, the truth about what has been twisted, weaponized, and turned upside down online. And let me tell you this, friends, we are not done. There's more to come, in fact, a lot more. We have spoken to jurors. We have spoken with witnesses, and very soon we're going to be bringing you the details from those conversations, because there are still people out there lying about what happened inside that courthouse. There are still people inventing narratives about the jury room while selling merchandise. There are still people spreading falsehoods about pressure, race, intimidation, and misconduct. And the people who were actually there, the people who actually know, the people who sat through it, heard it, and most importantly, lived it, deserve to be heard over all of that noise. So yes, there will be more episodes. There will be more truth. I hope to bring all of you more clarity. And there will be more careful, responsible, fact-centered work, which this case deserved all along. To the members of the jury who have reached out to me, thank you. Thank you for your courage, for your service, and for your willingness to speak truth in a moment where so many have chosen recklessness over responsibility. And to any jurors out there, witnesses, or individuals connected to this case who may be listening, I want you to know this: my door is open, you are welcome, and I'm happy to have an off-the-record conversation with you, unless and until you give me permission to share. I want to hear from people who were actually in the room, not just the people performing online. And to those of you who have supported Classic City Crime through all of this, thank you from the bottom of my heart, truly. As many of you know, we have had to think very carefully about sponsorships and business support, because we have had threats that businesses would be review bombed simply for supporting us. That is heartbreaking, and it's wrong. And it is yet another example of how poisonous all of this has become. So to those of you who have chosen to donate directly in support of us, thank you. Thank you for believing in what we do and for helping us continue. You've made it possible for us to research, record, travel, interview, and all the rest of it, telling the truth most importantly. If you would like to support the podcast, you can scan the QR code on your screen or visit the link down in the comments, because whether it's $5 or $500, it matters. Every bit of support helps us keep doing this work and helps us keep bringing you the truth. And remember, we are taking your support one step further. We're donating a portion of proceeds to our friends at Anchor Point, formerly Sane Inc., whose mission is to provide victim forensic examinations and evidence collection, court testimony, and community prevention education related to rape, sexual assault, and physical assault. In light of what we learned that the murderer Edrick Faust did to Tara Baker, I cannot think of a more important cause. You can learn more about their work and make a tax-deductible gift directly to them at saneinc.org. That's sane.org. And while you're here, make sure you subscribe to Classic City Crime on YouTube and follow us on Facebook so that you don't miss what is coming next, because I can promise you what's coming next still matters. Above all else, before we leave this episode, I want to bring you back to where it always belongs, back to Tara, because that is who this has always been about. Not the live streamers, not me, not the self-appointed experts, not the opportunists, not the people who found this case when it became fashionable, but Tara, a daughter, a loved one, a young woman whose life was stolen, a name that should have never had to become a cause, and yet one that has changed so many of us who have come to know her story. I say it often, and I mean it every single time, that I never knew my life could be changed so much by someone I've never even met. But Tara did that for me. She changed me. Her story changed me. Her family changed me. And this fight for truth, for justice, for her memory changed me too. And so as we close, I just want to say what I hope this podcast has said from the very beginning. Tara mattered. In fact, no, Tara matters. And Tara will continue to matter long after the noise fades, long after the cameras leave, and long after the rumor mill moves on to the next target. Here, we'll keep speaking her name with care. We'll keep telling the truth, and we will keep going. And we're going to do it how? Together. Thank you, everyone. I'll see you right back here very soon. I'm Cameron J.